I was scrolling through YouTube late last night when I came across a game announcement that piqued my interest. I decided to give it a quick glance, and only a few seconds in, I knew this was something I'd enjoy. A turn-based deck-building Souls-like? Count me in. I then went ahead and played through the entirety of the demo available on Steam, and wow, I was not disappointed. The whole game revolves around a woman named Ro, whose son, a deer? I'm not quite sure if that's literal or his spirit just takes the form of one, but he died. Ro heads into the realm of the spirits in hopes of bringing him back, and the spirits aren't very friendly. They take the form of these woodland creatures, from boars to ravens to floating logs, and of course, you've got to fight all of these creatures. The combat system, while not revolutionary, still feels great. It's a grid-based positioning system mixed with the card structure of games like Slay the Spire and Inscription. Because of this, not only are you attempting to min-max energy reserves and card buffs to output the absolute highest number of damage a turn, but you've also got to keep track of enemy locations. Did the Raven use a movement booster, adding +1 to everyone's max move range? Is that boar able to move 5 or 6 squares this turn? I sure hope it's 5, or else I will most certainly be dead. I found myself sitting and actually planning my next moves, which is good. I felt that in games like Slay the Spire, I often ended up in a scenario where I would just try to do damage. In Death Howl, this edition of the grid-style movement system added a new level of difficulty and strategy that I thoroughly enjoyed. Since this is a demo, there isn't a tutorial, and a lot of the discovery is done by trial and error. After my first combat, I was rewarded with materials. These materials, which are dropped by enemies as well as found around the environment, serve two purposes. The first is crafting. This game, instead of having you unlock cards by opening chests in dungeons or buying them from a shop, makes you craft your cards. The different materials you pick up from enemies or hidden around the world can be used to create a plethora of new additions to your deck. When I looked through this craftable menu, I felt it was a bit lackluster. There seemed to be a very small number of cards that I could craft, and that's when I discovered the second purpose of all the crafting materials I was picking up. Every time I grabbed one, this counter on the top of my screen was increasing. I had absolutely no idea what it meant until I collected that many items. That number at the top is actually a collection goal. Every item you pick up adds an amount to it, which varies based on the item's rarity. Once you hit your collection goal, new cards are actually unlocked for you to craft. I was able to find 24 new card recipes this way, with 6 appearing for every collection completion and 4 total collections to complete. These expanded my playstyle options way more, and for a demo, seeing this much variety is incredibly refreshing. Now, materials aren't the only thing you need to upgrade cards. It took me a bit to figure it out, but you also need Death Howls. The number that shows up between the ingredients is actually the amount of Death Howls you need to craft the card. Crafting a really good one? Gonna need some rare materials and more Death Howls. These are obtained by just killing enemies, so you can get a large number of them pretty quickly. Since this game is less of a slew of dungeon rooms and encounters thrown at you and more of an open world exploration experience, I was a bit worried. Finding enemies and locations in games like this normally gives me a bit of a headache. If it's too open world and choose your own adventure, I quickly get overwhelmed and lost. But when I opened up the map for this game, I was met with a pleasant surprise. It's perfectly minimal. What I mean by this is it shows what needs to be shown. Important landmarks, terrain impasses, routes to new areas, and that's it. It keeps it simple while still being easy enough to follow, and I can't put into words how much I appreciate that. The small red diamonds are enemies, the larger ones are mini-boss or harder than normal ones, and the yellow symbols are nests, which are sources of crafting materials that are accessible after fighting one of those harder enemy camps. If you've already cleared an enemy camp, the diamonds are grayed out, which I think is a small but incredibly helpful quality of life feature. You might have noticed I didn't mention these blue symbols. Remember how I said earlier that this game falls under the Souls-like genre? This classification comes from these blue markers on the map, which are stone circles that refill your health, at the cost of respawning all of the enemies. Think Elden Ring Bonfire. You can also teleport to any of the stone circles you've discovered, which I love. This is also where the game presents some options for playstyle changes. When you rest at one of these locations, all of your Death Howls are consumed. So instead of using them to craft cards, they're put towards rewards. Think of it like upgrading your save points, and once you donate enough Death Howls, you receive things like new cards, buffs you receive for damaging enemies during battle, and totem slots. Totems are another option for gameplay variation. In the demo, you only get one slot, but based on the menus, the full game should let you have 4 equipped at a time once you've upgraded stone circles in different areas. From the spaces in the totem menu, there should be 12 in the demo, but I was only able to find 8. Their abilities range from shielding you on a kill, 1 free movement every turn, and random enemy debuffs. There's a ton of variety, and I hope that the full game requires some kind of swapping between them for different battles, instead of just featuring one super strong one that you can use the whole game. Now, I've talked a lot about the gameplay, but I just want to focus on the art design for a minute. The incredibly detailed pixel art style really just adds to the atmosphere of the game. If you stand still for a moment, you'll see trees slightly swaying, the river flowing, and little squirrels will run away from your character. The level of attention to detail just goes to show that it's developed by an incredibly passionate team. I mean, when this mysterious, evil-sounding voice starts talking to your character, which causes you to tweak out, the game gets more pixelated to show the distress. Like, come on! That's so cool! The demo only includes a single area of the completed game, and when you're shown the full zoomed-out map, you realize that this is just a minuscule area of what the entire game will be. I counted 13 of these areas total on the map, and with how much fun I had in just one of those, I can't wait to see what some of the enemies and landscapes look like. I was able to complete the demo in an hour or so, but I decided to roam around a bit to see what else the game had to offer, and I'm glad I did. I noticed some of the Steam reviews saying that the game seemed a bit too easy, and I am convinced these people didn't find the secret caves. If you go up to some of the rock faces and interact with them, you can open hidden caves with absurdly hard battles. Maybe I'm just bad, but fighting through just a single one of these took me well over an hour, and finally clearing it after mastering the tech I needed to use felt incredibly rewarding. I mean, I was calculating the exact number of steps enemies could move, utilizing the turn order to block one enemy behind another. It felt great. I love that added challenge that, while not required, can be completed whenever you'd like, and you're rewarded with a cool totem when you complete these hidden areas. Now, there are some incredibly mild quality of life changes I did see some reviews talk about, and I do agree with 2 of them specifically. The movement does feel a little bit slow, and when walking through some of the bigger areas, I could see it being a bit annoying. And it's something so slight that like a 10% increase in character speed could solve that. Or maybe we're just so used to dopamine rushes that it's completely on the player, and the devs intended this. My other complaint, if you can even call it that, comes from material gathering. If you've ever played a card battler game, you know that you're going to want to have multiple copies of some cards in your deck. You have to craft cards with materials, and since some of the materials for the really powerful cards are dropped only by the more challenging champion type enemies, the grinding to craft the cards could get a bit tedious at some points. But this is a demo release. I mean, it literally says demo does not represent final product on the top of the screen the entire time you play. So I'm sure everything will be ironed out for the final release. Overall, Death Howl, even just in demo form, was incredibly fun for the few hours I spent fully completing it, minus a few totems. If it seems at all interesting to you, go try it out for yourself, and wishlist it if you're as excited about the full release as me. I'll throw a link down in the description too. I'm super excited to follow the development of this one, and I feel like it'll be a refreshing addition to the card battler genre.